Hillary Rosen, before you had said you didn't think this was a good night for Sarah Palin.
Yeah, well, West Virginia, I guess, isn't up there, too. She had endorsed Racy, right, against Manchin. But, look, we could argue about whether these endorsements mean something.
They don't.
When we look at where she really spent a lot of time, she spent a lot of time with Carly Fiorina in California. She spent a lot of visible energy with Christine O'Donnell. So the good news for the Republicans, I think, is that there are actually a lot of new women on the horizon. And I think that they've done a good job actually recruiting women in this cycle. That doesn't mean that Sarah Palin's not the front runner. But there are other people who now are going to take.
When you look at the chart, Anderson, she did a lot of good for conservative candidates who are in already conservative states. Getting a conservative governor of Oklahoma who happens to be her choice, that's one thing. But it shows that she couldn't flip seats. In California, in Delaware, in West Virginia, where there was a Democrat. She wasn't able to sort of put forward a Tea Party candidate who could flip this.
You can't give her credit for the governor of Texas.
Let me tell you what she did do. She dominated one more time. Every week we've been on this show, we've been talking about Sarah Palin. Wherever she was, we're talking about Sarah Palin.
Wait a minute. And she's a factor.
And she's a big factor if she chooses to be. She's not basically made that decision yet, but if she wants to be, starting in Iowa,
that energy that captured 60 Republican House seat, a lot of that came from her.
Absolutely.
But for the first time, Republicans will always turn to the last guy, right? Whoever was the runner-up in the last election. That may not be the case this time. There's a brand new crop of Republican candidates, lots of women, lots of fresh faces, lots of new conservatives. There once was this young state senator that came out of nowhere on the Democratic side who's president now. This may be the time that happens in the Republican side.
Anderson, she's dominating the conversation because we're sitting here saying this is what she did. That list means nothing. Where's the Mitt Romney list? He endorsed a ton of people as well. Have we broken down who he endorsed? The reality is if you win, you ran. You sat here, went out, and got the votes, okay? Also, Sarah Palin had nothing to do with Rick Perry winning in Texas, okay? Right. Nothing. So you're trying to credit her with that, but it makes no sense. She gets elevated because we sit here and put her above everybody else, but there were other Republicans who were out there endorsing. Where was Palin? Where was Romney? And so that's what it boils down to. Endorsements mean nothing.
Exactly why Christine O'Donnell is legitimately and honestly my hero for this election season, because we have been forced since September to talk about nothing but Christine O'Donnell because she has dominated the news. Never mind Alvin Green in South Carolina, but because we've spent so much time talking about Christine O'Donnell, there are a lot of candidates tonight who are elected because they didn't get any airtime. They didn't get the vetting that Christine O'Donnell did. No, I absolutely think so.
I think that's probably true.
Because we're not talking. I mean, there's a difference between the national media. I can assure you that in Nevada, they were talking about Sharon Engel. I can assure you that in California, they were talking about Meg Whitman. Just because we're talking about Sarah Palin,
when the national media dominates those conversations.
Yeah, but if we're talking about somebody who's down 20 points in the polls, but then when you look at a Pennsylvania race that was tight, the Washington State race that was tight.
We also talked about that.
Okay, no. You can't even remotely compare the amount of coverage of national media to O'Donnell's race and all the other races combined.
Can we get back to Sarah Palin?
She's down 20 points.
Can we get back to
and lost by 16.
Gloria, let's go back to Sarah.
Can we get back to Sarah Palin? Because we're talking about Christine O'Donnell again, and she lost, right? Sarah Palin has positioned herself brilliantly, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
She has become the kingmaker here. She is somebody who has set herself up as the anti-establishment candidate for what? We don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to rule the world among anti-establishment people. But she's the one who said tonight, we got to try and figure out a way to work with the Republican establishment. But when somebody's going to hold Republicans in Congress accountable for whether they cut the budget or whether they shut down the government, as Eric seems to think they ought to do, it's going to be Sarah Palin.
Is Sarah Palin then to blame for not winning the Senate?
No. That is not fair. That is not fair. I promise you, if Sarah Palin, the first meeting of the Republican conference, if she was the guest, she would get a standing ovation, and every single one of those guys would want to line her up for a fundraiser.
I don't think. I mean, this was a day of incredible Republican triumph,
right.
And Sarah Palin is the most prominent Republican in the United States. So the idea that she deserves blame for anything, or there should be recriminations for anything, I think is preposterous. This is a day of Republican celebration, and I think she is the symbol of the contemporary Republican Party.
They're afraid of her. Privately, they don't like her.
You know, just because
and
a
they're
bunch of
afraid
people
of her power.
at the Palm in Washington are afraid of her.
I don't know if they're afraid of her. They don't like her.
Because they want to be the 24th.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, Eric. What?
Yeah, there are a lot of people scared of Sarah Palin and who hate Sarah Palin because they're all previously affiliated to future 2012 candidates not named Sarah Palin.
Can we just all agree, though, that this election was not won by Republicans? It was won by independents shifting their loyalty from Democrats in 2008.
It would be more fair to say the Democrats lost it than the independents won it.
Maybe that too. We lost a lot of enthusiasm on the Democratic side. Turnout was lower than people expected. But independents shifted here, and I think it's pretty important to think about Sarah Palin as Ed talks about her, which is she is a Republican. She will continue to help lead Republicans. And where people are really going to be held accountable, to Gloria's point, I think, is where it's the independents, it's the dissatisfied, unemployed voter who doesn't care about either party, who is going to hold this Congress accountable.
Do you think that's true? Remember where Sarah Palin was a year ago after the McCain campaign. Her base in Alaska was crumbling. She was under investigation. She was on a governor's salary. Her political fortunes were going downhill. She's had a brilliant political year. She's now the power behind 1,000 thrones instead of sitting on one. She's the biggest fish in the pond. She energizes the Republican Party. And like a consultant friend of mine once said, I'm occasionally responsive but never responsible. She now has power without responsibility. It's a great job. It's a great job. It all ends if she runs for president, but it also ends if she ever says she won't run for president.
There's a larger point here as well, in that the Republicans spent this entire year campaigning against Nancy Pelosi. The Democrats spent a whole lot of time talking about Sarah Palin, a woman who doesn't do anything in Washington. Are they going to continue for the next 2 years talking about Sarah Palin as opposed to John Boehner or Mitch McConnell?
It's amazing to me that we are spending a huge election in which Republicans have made historic gains in the House talking about someone who's not on the ballot. Sarah Palin is a powerful figure in the Republican base. She is popular among populist conservatives. She has negative capability when it comes to independence. But she is not. She is a media fascination. She is a celebrity. She is a power broker with conservative populists. But she is not on the ballot. She is not the story tonight.
Give the people credit who actually won.